My world had shrunk to the cool, sterile glow of a computer screen and the frantic beat of my own heart, a wild drum against the cage of my ribs. It was well past midnight, the silence of the office so profound I could hear the hum of the server room down the hall, a mechanical lullaby. And then a different sound, the soft, hesitant click of heels on polished concrete. I didn't need to look up to know it was her. My body knew the rhythm of her walk before my mind could even form the thought. Isabella Vance, my boss, the woman whose very presence could turn my carefully ordered world into a swirling vortex of want and terror. She paused at the threshold of my cubicle, a silhouette against the wall of glass that showcased the glittering, indifferent city below. Her blazer was off, draped over one arm, and her silk blouse was untucked at the waist, the first two buttons undone. It was a level of dishevelment I had never witnessed. The Isabella Vance I knew was a fortress of impeccable tailoring and controlled composure. This version, with her dark hair escaping its low knot and shadows of exhaustion under her luminous eyes, was dangerously, heartbreakingly human. "You're still here," she stated, her voice a low thrum that vibrated straight through me. It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement of a shared, silent understanding. The Clayton account was a beast, and we were both in its belly. I could only nod, my throat too tight for words. My gaze dropped to the spreadsheet on my screen, a constellation of meaningless numbers. I felt her move closer, the air shifting around her, carrying the faint, intoxicating scent of her perfume, night-blooming jasmine and clean, cold air. She came to stand behind my chair, leaning over my shoulder to see the screen. Her warmth radiated against my back, a brand through the thin cotton of my shirt. A strand of her hair brushed my cheek, and I stopped breathing. Her hand, with its perfectly manicured nails, reached out and pointed to a line item on the screen. "This is the problem," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper in the quiet room. Her finger hovered, not touching the monitor, but close enough that I could see the delicate silver band she always wore. "The discrepancy is in the overseas transfer. You've been looking in the wrong place." In that moment, it wasn't about the account or the money or the crushing pressure. It was about the devastating proximity of her. The heat of her body so close to mine, the whisper of her silk sleeve against my shoulder, the profound intimacy of her showing me a vulnerability I was certain no one else ever saw. This was the twist in the tale of my life. I wasn't just a dedicated junior analyst working late. I was a woman falling, helplessly and irrevocably, for the one person who held the keys to my entire professional future. And in the quiet of that empty office, with the city lights winking like distant, mocking stars, I knew I would risk everything for just one more moment of this terrifying, exquisite closeness. The first time I saw Isabella Vance, she was a storm contained in a Valentino suit. It was my first day at Vance Capital, and she was conducting the morning executive meeting, a general addressing her troops. Her voice was calm, precise, a scalpel dissecting complex financial data with an effortless grace that left me in awe. She was older than me, not by decades, but by a chasm of experience and a steely resolve that seemed woven into her very DNA. I was 24, fresh-faced and drowning in imposter syndrome. She was 34, a legend in the making, and utterly untouchable. For months, I existed in a state of terrified admiration. My desk was situated just outside her corner office, a placement that felt both like a privilege and a punishment. I learned the map of her moods by the sound of her door closing, a firm click for concentration, a soft sigh for frustration, a sharp slam for anger, which was rare but terrifying. I memorized the schedule of her coffee, black, 1 sugar, delivered at 9:15 a.m. sharp, and the way she would absently twist that silver ring on her right hand when she was reading a particularly dense report. My feelings were a secret I kept even from myself, a low-grade fever I'd learned to live with. It was a professional crush, I told myself. A natural response to a powerful, brilliant mentor. But then the late nights started. The big projects that landed on my desk with a sticky note in her elegant script. Your eyes on this, please. I trust your judgment. Those notes became my most treasured possessions. I would smooth them out and tuck them into my journal, pathetic talismans of a connection that existed only in my head. The chemistry wasn't in grand gestures, but in the quiet, accumulating moments. The time her hand brushed mine as she handed me a file, a jolt of static electricity that felt like a lightning strike. The afternoon I found her standing by my desk, holding a draft of my proposal, her brow furrowed not in criticism, but in genuine thought. This is good, Alex, she had said, my name sounding like a foreign, beautiful language on her lips. Really good. You see the bigger picture. That's rare. The praise had warmed me for a week. I began to notice the small cracks in her armor. The way she would massage her temple after a long call, a flicker of weariness crossing her features before the mask of control slid back into place. The framed photograph on her desk turned just enough that I could never see who was in it. The single, sad smile she would sometimes offer when she thought no one was looking, directed at the cityscape beyond her window. These were the fragments I collected, the pieces of a puzzle I was desperate to solve. She was no longer just my boss. She was a complex, beautiful mystery, and my heart was a desperate detective. The night of the Clayton account was the catalyst. After she pointed out the discrepancy, we worked side by side in her office, the door closed, the world outside forgotten. I was hyper-aware of every movement, every shared glance. At one point, she stood to get us water, and when she returned, she didn't resume her seat behind the desk. Instead, she perched on the edge of it, right next to me, her leg mere inches from my arm. The air grew thick, charged with something that had nothing to do with finance. We finally cracked the problem as the first hints of dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. The relief was a physical thing, a shared exhalation. She looked at me, her eyes soft in the morning light, all the sharp edges gone. I couldn't have done this without you, she said, her voice raw with honesty. It was the closest we had ever been, both physically and emotionally. The space between us hummed with unspoken words. My gaze dropped to her lips, and for one heart-stopping second, I thought I saw her own eyes flicker down to mine. The world tilted. It was there, in that silent, suspended moment, that the professional crush I had been nursing shattered, and in its place, a real, terrifying, all-consuming love began to bloom. The dynamic between us shifted after that night. A new, fragile intimacy wove itself into the fabric of our professional interactions. Her emails, once terse and directive, now sometimes contained a casual, "Hope you're having a good morning." She started using my name more often, Alex, and the way she said it felt like a caress. We developed a secret language of glances across the boardroom table, a shared smile when someone else reiterated a point we had already privately discussed. The first kiss happened on a business trip to Chicago. A client dinner had run late, and we found ourselves in the hushed, opulent bar of our hotel, the only souls brave enough to face the late hour. We were seated in a secluded booth, the dim lighting casting soft shadows on her face. We weren't talking about work. We were talking about books, about the places we'd dreamed of visiting as children, about the quiet disappointments that shape a life. She told me about the photograph on her desk, her mother, who had passed away a few years ago, the one person who had ever believed she could conquer the world. "She'd have liked you," Isabella said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. Her guard was down, her eyes luminous with a vulnerability that made my chest ache. "How do you know?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because you see me," she said simply, her gaze holding mine. "Not the CEO, not the figurehead. You see the woman who is tired and scared and lonely." The word hung between us, a confession of monumental proportions. I didn't think. I reached out under the table and found her hand, lacing my fingers with hers. Her breath hitched, her eyes widening slightly, but she didn't pull away. Her grip tightened, a silent, desperate answer. Later, we stood outside her hotel room door, the corridor stretching silent and endless in both directions. The air was thick with anticipation. "Good night, Alex," she whispered, her voice husky. "Good night, Isabella." But neither of us moved. We were trapped in the gravitational pull of the impossible. Her eyes searched mine, asking a question, seeking permission. I gave it with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She leaned in, her movement slow, deliberate, giving me every opportunity to retreat. I stood my ground, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Her lips met mine. It wasn't a gentle, exploratory kiss. It was a dam breaking. It was months of pent-up longing, of stolen glances and repressed desire, unleashed in a single, searing connection. Her lips were soft and tasted of expensive whiskey and a hint of mint. Her hands came up to cradle my face, her touch both tender and possessive. I melted into her, my own hands finding their way to her waist, pulling her closer until I could feel the entire, delicious length of her body against mine. The world fell away, the company, the ethics, the risk. There was only her mouth on mine, her scent enveloping me, the soft sound of her breath catching in her throat. It was the best and most foolish thing I had ever done. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. Returning to the office after Chicago was like stepping onto a stage in the middle of a play, everyone else knowing their lines except for us. The professional facade was back in place, but now it felt thin, a sheet of ice over a roaring current. Every closed-door meeting was fraught with new meaning. The brush of her hand as she passed me a document sent a jolt of electricity up my arm. The way her eyes would find mine during a presentation, holding my gaze for a second too long, was a secret message that only I could decipher. We began a dangerous, exhilarating double life. In public, we were the CEO and her promising junior analyst. In private, we were Isabella and Alex, two women discovering a hunger in each other they hadn't known they possessed. Our second kiss was in my apartment, after she'd driven me home under the pretense of discussing a project. The moment my front door closed, she pushed me against it, her mouth finding mine with a desperate urgency that stole my breath. Her hands slid under my shirt, her palms hot against the skin of my back, tracing the curve of my spine. Right there, I gasped into her mouth as her fingers found a particularly tense knot, and her touch softened, becoming a soothing stroke that unraveled me completely. The first night we spent together was at her place, a penthouse that was as sleek and beautiful as she was, but felt strangely empty, like a museum. That night, she showed me the woman behind the title. She was hesitant, almost shy, as she led me to her bedroom. We undressed each other slowly, in the dim light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, every revealed inch of skin in new territory to be mapped and worshipped. Making love to her was like finally reading a book I had only ever been able to study the cover of. It was slow and deep and profoundly emotional. I learned the places that made her sigh, the spot on her neck that made her shudder, the way her body arched against mine when she fell apart, my name a broken prayer on her lips. Afterward, we lay entangled in her vast bed, her head on my chest, my fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. In the dark, she whispered her fears. The pressure from the board, the constant scrutiny, the fear of being perceived as weak. "This," she murmured, her hand splayed over my heart. "This is the only thing that feels real. You feel real." I told her my own secrets, my family's quiet disappointment that I'd chosen the corporate world over something more noble, my own fears that I was in over my head, that I was a fraud who would soon be discovered. In that bed, we were not boss and employee. We were two equals, offering each other sanctuary. But the outside world was a constant, threatening presence. We became masters of deception. Stolen weekends in remote inns where we could hold hands in public. Clandestine dinners in the back corners of obscure restaurants. Our relationship was a beautiful, fragile bird we kept caged in the dark, knowing that sunlight could mean its end. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach every time we entered the office together, every time I had to call her MS, Vance, in front of colleagues. I was living a double life, and the weight of the secret was beginning to leave cracks in my carefully constructed composure. The turning point came from an unexpected and utterly mundane direction. The company's annual ethics review. A mandatory seminar for all employees, led by a stern-faced woman from HR who drilled into us the perils of conflicts of interest, specifically focusing on fraternization between superiors and subordinates. She used words like power imbalance, coercion, and termination. I sat in the audience, my palms sweating, feeling as though a spotlight was on me. I dared a glance at Isabella, who was sitting perfectly still in the front row, her posture ramrod straight. She didn't look back. That evening, in the safety of my apartment, the dam broke. "They could fire you," I said, my voice trembling as I paced the length of my living room. "Not just me. You. This could cost you everything you've built." Isabella was standing by the window, a glass of wine untouched in her hand. "I know the risks, Alex." "Do you?" I pressed, the panic I'd been suppressing for months finally bubbling over. "Because I'm the disposable one here. I'm the one who would be seen as the opportunistic junior who slept her way to the top. Your reputation might survive, but mine? My career would be over before it even started." She turned to me then, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I lie awake at night terrified of what this could do to you? This company is my life's work, Alex. But you're becoming my life." Her confession should have comforted me. Instead, it amplified the terror. The stakes were no longer just professional, they were profoundly personal. We were standing on a cliff edge, holding hands, and the fall would destroy us both, just in different ways. If it kept you hooked, subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next. The tension became a third presence in our relationship, a cold shadow that followed us everywhere. We started arguing. Small, stupid things at first that were really about the enormous, terrifying thing we couldn't control. I became paranoid, convinced that everyone knew, that every whispered conversation between colleagues was about us. I jumped when my phone rang, fearing it was HR. The joy of our secret began to curdle into a constant, low-grade anxiety. The climax arrived on a Tuesday. A board member, a gruff old man named Robert, who had never liked Isabella's modern approach, called me into his office. He didn't beat around the bush. "There are rumors, Ms. Evans," he said, his voice like gravel, "about you and Ms. Vance. Unprofessional rumors that are bad for morale. I'm sure they're just that, rumors. But I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't make it clear that the board takes the company's ethical guidelines very, very seriously." I left his office, my legs feeling like water. This was it. The sword had fallen. I went straight to Isabella's office, bypassing her assistant with a look that brooked no argument. I told her everything, my words tumbling out in a frantic, terrified rush. She listened, her face a carefully neutral mask, but I saw the panic in her eyes. She stood and walked to her window, turning her back to me. The silence stretched thin and sharp as a razor blade. "He's giving us a warning," she finally said, her voice flat. "He has no proof. If we stop now, if we are meticulously, painfully professional from this moment on, it will blow over. Stop." The word was a punch to the gut. "Is that what you want?" She turned, and the look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated agony. "What I want is irrelevant. What is relevant is protecting you. I brought you into this. The power dynamic he spoke of, it's real. I can't let my feelings destroy your future." It felt like a goodbye. It felt like she was choosing the company, her legacy, over me, over us. The room swam, and I felt the hot sting of tears in my eyes. I had risked everything for her, my job, my reputation, my heart. And it seemed it hadn't been enough. "So that's it?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "We just pretend none of this ever happened? We pretend that I don't know what your skin tastes like, that you don't whisper my name in the dark." A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "Alex," I couldn't bear it. The sight of her in pain, the sound of my name on her lips like a requiem. I turned and walked out of her office, out of the building, and into the anonymous flow of the city, my heart shattering into a million irreparable pieces. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you don't miss the next one. I didn't go back to the office the next day, or the day after that. I called in sick, which was technically true. I was heartsick, lovesick, every possible kind of sick. My apartment felt like a prison. I ignored her calls, her texts, a beautiful, heartbreaking bouquet of white gardenias that arrived with no note. She was honoring her own decree of professionalism, even in her apology. It only made it worse. A week passed. The silence was a physical weight on my chest. I knew I had to go back, to face the music, to collect my things and resign. I couldn't exist in that space, so close to her and yet a world apart. I dressed in my most impersonal, armor-like black suit and went to the office. My desk had been cleared. A single, sealed envelope with my name on it sat in the center. My heart plummeted. This was it. My termination letter. I picked it up with trembling hands, ready to turn and leave without a scene. "Alex." Her voice came from behind me. I froze, my back to her. I heard her footsteps, then felt her hand, gentle on my shoulder, turning me around. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup faintly smudged. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "Don't," I said, my voice thick. "Please don't make this harder." "Open it," she whispered, nodding toward the envelope. Confused, I tore it open. It wasn't a termination letter. It was a promotion. A new position, created just for me, head of strategic development, reporting directly to the board. A position that placed me on her level, that erased the power imbalance, that made us equals. I looked up at her, utterly bewildered. "I don't understand." "I went to the board," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I told them everything. About us. I didn't give them a choice. I told them I was in love with you, that I had never been more certain of anything in my life, and that I could not, preside over a company that would force me to choose between my heart and my career. I told them they could accept this new structure, with you in a role that negates any ethical concerns, or they could accept my resignation. The world stopped. The air left my lungs. She had risked it all, not just for me, but for us. She had bet her entire life's work on the truth of what we had. You resigned?" I stammered. "They didn't accept it," she said, a small, watery smile touching her lips. "It seems they value me more than they value their outdated prejudices." The vote was unanimous. The new structure is effective immediately. I was crying now, tears of shock, of relief, of a love so profound it felt like it would crack me open. You risked everything. She reached out and cupped my face, her thumb wiping away my tears. You are everything, Alex. I was a fool to think I could ever walk away from you. And there, in the middle of the office, in front of God and everyone, she leaned in and kissed me. It was not a stolen, secret kiss. It was a claim, a promise, a new beginning. The scandal, as they called it, lasted about a week. There were whispers, of course, and a few raised eyebrows in meetings. But Isabella's preemptive, brutally honest strategy had robbed the gossips of their power. We were transparent, we were professional during work hours, and we were unapologetically in love outside of them. My new role was a challenge I thrived in, and the respect I earned was my own, built on my ideas and my work, not on my relationship with the CEO. We never went back to hiding. Our love, once a caged bird, now flew in the open air, its wings strong and sure. We bought a house together, a place with a garden, far from the sterile perfection of her penthouse. It's filled with light and the messy, beautiful evidence of our shared life, my books piled on her neat shelves, her expensive perfume next to my grocery store body wash on the bathroom counter. Sometimes, late at night, I'll watch her sleeping, the moon tracing the elegant line of her shoulder, and my heart will swell with a gratitude so fierce it steals my breath. I fell in love with my boss, a fact that once filled me with terror. I risked everything for her, my career, my heart, my future. But she taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that the biggest risk is not in loving, but in not being brave enough to fight for that love when it's real. She wasn't just my boss. She was my battle, my victory, and my peace. And I would risk it all again, 1,000 times over, for the privilege of waking up beside her. If you felt this journey, subscribe to Sapphic Tales for more stories where love finds a way.